Hi and welcome to episode 7 of Book Club. Today I am going to read yet another story out of the Fearless Fairy Tales. This story is a very funny story about farts. Jack and the Baked Beanstalk. Jack was completely obsessed with baked beans. He ate beans on toast for breakfast, baked bean sarnies for lunch, and loved nothing more than baked bean soup for dinner. Basically just baked beans with most of the beans taken out. It was mid-afternoon, and Jack was microwaving himself a massive slice of baked bean pie with an extra massive dollop of baked beans on the side as a light pre-tea time snack when he noticed that 5 of the beans had started glowing a strange neon orange color. "That's weird," said Jack, showing the beans to his granddad. "You've gone off," grunted his granddad, tossing the entire bowl out of the window. "If you eat those, you'll be farting all night like that Rumpelstiltskin chap or your grandmother." That night, when Jack went to bed, he dreamt that he couldn't stop farting and that his farts chased him all the way down the street. Jack woke up hot, clammy and disturbed, and headed downstairs to fix himself a midnight snack of baked bean ice cream. As he slipped it down, he noticed something out of the kitchen window, and just for a moment he thought he was still dreaming. Because right there, in the garden, was the biggest baked beanstalk you've ever seen. Jack closed his eyes and pinched himself, a surefire way to check if you're dreaming. But when he opened his eyes again, the baked beanstalk was still there. The slimy orange plant climbed all the way up into the sky, past the birds, past the clouds, and even past the ozone layer, which, if you don't know, is very high indeed and starts at 10 kilometers from the ground. Jack estimated that it was at least 1,000 times taller than the tallest building in the known universe. Incidentally, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai is only 828 meters high, and it was certainly covered in more tomato sauce than the Burj Khalifa. Jack was rubbing his sleepy eyes when, without warning, a ginormous giant came hurtling down the beanstalk at 344 meters per second. "Whee!" screamed the giant excitedly, like he was sliding down the world's longest water slide. But Jack didn't hear it until after the event, as the giant was traveling faster than the speed of sound, which is 343 meters per second, by the way. The giant crash-landed in Jack's granddad's vegetable patch, crushing the cabbages, squashing the squashes, mashing the marrows, and leaving a huge crater in his wake. Boink! That was the delayed noise of him landing, because he was traveling faster than the speed of sound, remember? Jack pinched himself again. "Ouch!" he yelled. He was definitely still awake. "Fee, fi, fo, fo. Oh dear, I'm a bit hoarse. I smell the juice of tomato sauce," coughed the giant, trying to clear his throat. "That'll be all the screaming," said Jack, "and the tomato sauce is from the beanstalk. It's covered in the stuff." So am I, grinned the giant, licking some sauce off his giant forefinger. Oh bother, I'm going to have this jacket dry cleaned. I'll stick it in the wash, if it will fit in our machine, laughed Jack. I'm Jack, by the way. Who are you? Hi, Jack. I'm Janus. I'm a giant, though it's possible you guessed that already, he giggled, pulling a stray carrot out of his ear. Jack giggled too. Bake my beetroot and pummel my parsnips. What on earth is happening here? Exclaimed Jack's granddad as he came out through the back door. Why is there blooming baked beanstalk in my... Oh no! My allotment's been annihilated. Sorry about that, sir, piped up Janus. I'm afraid I've got a little portly of late. Need to lay off the baked beans. I'm addicted. Me too, said Jack, grinning. Can't get enough of them. They giggled again as Jack's granddad noticed Janus for the first time. Arrgh! There's a giant in my garden! He screamed, running off down the street in his pajamas and slippers, clutching his hot water bottle. Don't mind him, said Jack. Just a bit of a shock to find a giant sitting on your cellar in the middle of the night. It seems very nice here, said the giant, surveying the area. I think I'll go and tell my friends all about it. And with that, the giant clambered up the baked beanstalk and disappeared out of sight. A few weeks later, hundreds of giants had climbed down the beanstalk, and the crater in Jack's garden was almost the size of Varied Fort Dome, the largest crater in the world, which is more than 300 kilometers wide. Many of the giants decided to settle in the local area and look for employment. Janus quickly found a job on a building site. On account of his ability to bend steel girders as though they were pipe cleaners and lift boulders with his little finger. Jack and Janus became great friends and would often hang out together. They would giggle away over a BLT, beans, larger beans, and tomato sauce whenever Janus wasn't working long hours to earn enough money to support his family back home in Giant Land. But trouble was brewing. Some of the villagers had started complaining about the giants stealing the jobs, leaving huge footprints everywhere and speaking giantish instead of English. Jack thought this was thoroughly unfair, as the giants were doing jobs the villagers didn't want to do, and giantish was their mother tongue after all. He knew how hard Janus and the other giants worked to make sure their families didn't go hungry. Plus, it wasn't their fault they had big feet. I've got big ears, thought Jack, and that's not my fault. And so the village council decided there should be a vote on whether or not to chop down the baked beanstalk. If more than 50%, that's half, of the village council, that's 12 people, raised their hands, then the beanstalk was a goner, that's chopped down. If not, it stayed. Janus was very nervous about the vote, so Jack went along too for moral support. Raise your hand if you agree that the baked beanstalk should be chopped down, croaked the wizened old leader of the council. Jack crossed his fingers and counted the raised hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 6. Hooray! Only half of the people had put their hands up. It was a 50-50 split and not enough to take any action. Phew, that was a close shave, thought Jack, but he thought it a little too soon, because at that moment another hand slowly rose up into the air, and it wasn't any old hand. It was Jack's granddad's old hand. "I count 7 hands," declared the crinkled old council leader. "That's more than half. The baked beanstalk will be chopped down at midnight tonight." "How could you, Granddad?" cried Jack. "I'm sorry, Jack, but it's too gianty around these days. You'll understand when you're older." But Jack was sure that he would never understand. Janus was the kindest person he'd ever met, and life was so much better with him in it. "Goodbye, Jack," said Janus as he climbed back up the baked beanstalk later that evening. "I'm sorry we won't see each other again, but I've got to return to my family before they chop down the beanstalk." "I'll miss you," shouted Jack as Janus's head disappeared into the clouds. "I'll miss you too, Jack," came the distant reply along with a giant teardrop, which soaked Jack through from head to toe. Later that evening, after Jack had changed into some dry clothes, he traipsed down to the garden to join the crowd who had turned out to watch the beanstalk being chopped down. As a huge orange plant fell to the ground, Jack feared he would never ever see his best friend again. All he wanted to do was eat baked beans, but he couldn't even do that because all the baked beans in the village had been thrown away so that nobody could grow any more baked beanstalks in the future. In the weeks that followed the giant's departure, the villagers started to wonder if chopping down the beanstalk had been a terrible mistake. Because there were no giants left, there was nobody tall enough to change the light bulbs in lamp posts, or to reach the high shelves in supermarkets, or to build buildings quickly. The villagers took twice as long as the giants. But worst of all, the village felt a bit, boring, full of the same boring people, going about the same boring lives. "I'm sorry, Jack," said his granddad on the morning of Jack's 10th birthday. "We should never have chopped down the beanstalk. Maybe you could wish for another beanstalk when you blow out your candles tonight." "Don't be silly, Granddad," said Jack. "Everyone knows wishes aren't real." "Nobody thought magic baked beans were real, dear boy," replied his granddad. "And just look how that turned out." That evening, as Jack blew out the candles on his baked bean-shaped cake, he wished as hard as he could that another beanstalk would grow in the garden and that he would get to see his giant friend again. But nothing happened, so Jack slugged off to bed. It was the worst birthday ever. That night, Jack just couldn't get to sleep. He tossed and he turned and tossed. No matter how many baked beans he counted, he simply couldn't drift off. As he rolled to the very edge of his bed, he suddenly became rather uncomfortable. It was almost as if there was something lodged between the bed frame and the mattress, something tin-shaped. "Jumping jelly beans," thought Jack. "My emergency beans." Jack had always kept a tin of emergency baked beans hidden under his mattress in case there was ever a national shortage. How could he have forgotten? He raced downstairs in his pajamas, emptied the tin into a bowl, and shoved it into the microwave. Ping! Jack pulled out the bowl. All the beans looked completely normal, except for 5 of them that were glowing a huge, strange neon orange color and lighting up Jack's face, which had the biggest smile on it you've ever seen. A giant smile, you might say. The end. If you are new to my channel, the channel's name is Konnie Huq. If you like my videos, click like, subscribe and ring the bell. look out for more videos. See you next time. Bye.